Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Today we're going to explore one of the most important topics in all of human existence, something that affects every single person watching this video, regardless of your current beliefs or background. We're talking about the Day of Judgment, known in Arabic as Yawm al-Qiyamah. This isn't just a religious concept, it's described in Islamic texts as the ultimate reality that every soul will face, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, or anything else. Understanding this perspective can give you profound insights into how over 1.8 billion Muslims view life, death, and what comes after. Let me paint you a picture that will help you understand the scale of what we're discussing. Imagine you're living your completely normal life. You wake up, check your phone, maybe grab some coffee, head to work or school, laugh with friends, watch Netflix, go to sleep. Life feels permanent, predictable, routine. The sun rises and sets, the seasons change, years pass, and everything seems to follow natural laws that never change. Then, without any warning whatsoever, without any countdown or signs in the sky, a sound erupts that's so powerful, it makes every explosion in human history seem like a whisper. This sound comes from a trumpet, but not any ordinary trumpet. According to Islamic teachings, this instrument has been held by an angel named Israfil for countless ages, pressed to his lips, waiting for the single command from Allah to blow it. When that moment finally arrives, the first blast marks the beginning of the end of everything we know. What happens next isn't like any natural disaster you've ever heard about. The ground beneath everyone's feet doesn't just shake, it convulses as if the entire planet is being torn apart from its core. Mountains that have stood for millions of years don't just crumble, they explode into fine powder and scatter like dust in the wind. The oceans don't just have big waves, they literally boil and rage, sending walls of water taller than the tallest skyscrapers, crashing across entire continents. But perhaps most shocking of all, the sky itself begins tearing apart like a piece of fabric being ripped, and the stars that have been shining for billions of years start falling one by one, crashing down like massive burning meteorites. Now here's something that reveals a deep truth about human psychology under extreme stress. According to the Quran, on this day of ultimate terror, every person will be so overwhelmed with fear for their own survival that they'll actually run away from the people they love most. A man will flee from his own brother, from his mother and father, from his wife and children. Think about how powerful that statement is. These are the people you'd normally risk everything to protect. Yet the fear becomes so intense that everyone becomes completely focused on their own survival. The Quran describes people crying out nafsi, nafsi, which means myself, myself, showing how self-preservation instinct overrides everything else in moments of absolute crisis. This isn't random chaos though. Islamic theology teaches that this is divine justice finally being implemented. Throughout human history, we've seen corruption, injustice, people getting away with terrible crimes, the innocent suffering while the guilty prosper. On this day, all of that changes permanently. There are no more bribes, no more false court decisions, no more using wealth or connections to escape consequences. Every single soul will be held accountable for exactly what they did, no more and no less. The billionaire can't buy their way out. The politician can't use their influence. The celebrity can't rely on their fame, status, money, power. None of it has any value anymore. But the destruction doesn't stop with just the physical world and humanity. According to Islamic teachings, Allah, then commands the angel of death, known as Malak al-Maut, to complete his final and most comprehensive mission. Usually, this angel takes souls individually over the course of human history, but now he's tasked with something unprecedented, collecting every single living soul in all of existence simultaneously. He moves systematically through all of creation, starting with humans, then all animals, then the jinn, which are invisible beings made of fire, until the entire earth falls completely silent. But the mission continues beyond earthly life. Now even the angels themselves, these magnificent spiritual beings, who have been serving Allah since before humans were created, must return to their Creator. The angel of death begins with the lesser angels, taking their powerful souls one after another. Then he approaches the greatest among them. First, Jibril, known in English as Gabriel, the angel who brought divine revelations to all the prophets, including Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. His soul is taken. Next, Michael, known as Michael, the angel responsible for distributing rain and controlling natural resources that sustain life, gone. Finally, even Israfil, the very angel who blew the trumpet that started this entire process. His soul is seized. One by one, these incredible beings who have existed for eons disappear, until the angel of death finds himself completely alone in an empty, lifeless universe. Picture this moment of absolute cosmic loneliness. No voices, no movement, no light from stars, no sound except his own existence. In this terrifying isolation, he calls out desperately, "My Lord, no one remains alive except me." And Allah, with absolute divine authority, responds, "Die, on angel of death." In that final moment before his own end, the angel of death speaks words that should make all of us reflect deeply on our own mortality. He says, "By your might and your majesty, if I had truly understood how difficult and painful the process of taking souls really was, I would have begged you never to give me this responsibility." Then he dies, and absolute silence engulfs all of existence. Now we reach a moment of such cosmic significance that it's almost impossible for human minds to fully grasp. The heavens are empty, the earth is gone, every galaxy, every star, every planet, every living thing that ever existed is gone. What remains? Only Allah exists, alone in his absolute sovereignty and power. He declares, "To whom belongs all dominion today?" There's no one left to answer, because there's literally no one else in existence. So Allah answers himself. To Allah, the One, the Supreme, the Subject of all. This is a moment that demonstrates the temporary nature of everything we think is permanent, and the eternal nature of the Creator. But this isn't the end of the story. It's actually the setup for something even more incredible. Allah commands Israfil to be brought back to life and gives him a completely different instruction. Blow the trumpet again. This second blast is the polar opposite of the first. Where the first brought universal destruction, the second brings universal resurrection. Israfil raises the trumpet to his lips once more, and with a sound more powerful than thunder and lightning combined, he produces the second blast. What happens next is like watching the greatest magic trick ever performed, except it's completely real. Graves all across the earth burst open like flowers blooming in fast forward, but instead of petals emerging, human bodies rise up. Now think about this logically for a moment. Some of these people have been dead for thousands of years. Their bodies have completely decomposed, turned to dust, scattered by wind, absorbed by plants, eaten by animals, mixed with soil. Yet according to Islamic belief, Allah's power is so absolute that He can reassemble every single atom that ever belonged to each person. The dust comes together, bones reassemble themselves, flesh returns, and souls are reunited with their physical forms. From Adam, the very first human being, according to Islamic and biblical tradition, to the very last person born before the end times, every human who ever lived is brought back to life simultaneously. Imagine the psychological shock of this experience. You die, and from your perspective, you close your eyes in death and immediately open them again on the day of judgment. It doesn't matter if 1,000 years passed in between. For you, it feels instantaneous. People rise from their graves, brushing dirt from their hair and faces, trembling, completely confused about what's happening. The Quran describes them as emerging rapidly, as if they're rushing toward a specific target, because that's exactly what's occurring. They're being gathered for the most important appointment in the history of existence. From every corner of the earth, from every time period in human history, people begin moving toward a central gathering point. But here's something that surprises many people when they first learn about it. According to Islamic teachings, everyone is resurrected in the same state they were born, meaning barefoot, naked, and uncircumcised, just as they entered the world. This detail emphasizes the equality of all people before their Creator, regardless of what status symbols or material possessions they had in life. The emotional reactions vary dramatically based on how people lived their lives. Those who committed major sins cry out in terror, "Woe to us! Who has raised us from our resting place? We thought death was the end." But those who lived righteous lives, who always believed this day would come and prepared for it, they respond with recognition and even relief. This is exactly what Allah promised us, and His messengers told us the truth. Their reaction shows the psychological difference between those who lived with conscious awareness of accountability and those who assumed they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. As this massive gathering continues, strange and disturbing scenes begin appearing among the crowds, and each one tells a story about choices made in earthly life. There are women wearing garments made entirely of fire, burning continuously as they run and scream in agony. There are men with blood constantly pouring from their mouths, their faces twisted in torment. There are people who appear tiny, like ants, crawling under the feet of others and being trampled repeatedly. These aren't random punishments designed to be cruel. Each represents a perfect form of justice that mirrors the spiritual reality of certain sins. Those women wearing clothes of fire were the ones who used their bodies to promote immorality in the world. Maybe they were involved in inappropriate entertainment. Maybe they used social media to post revealing pictures that led others into temptation. Maybe they worked in industries that exploited sexuality. The fire clothing represents how their choices in life actually burned their own souls spiritually. And now that inner reality becomes visible externally, those men with blood pouring from their mouths were involved in riba, which means charging or paying interest, or they built their wealth by cheating others, taking money through deception and greed. The blood represents the forbidden wealth they consumed, which Islamic teaching says is like consuming the blood of their victims. Now that spiritual reality becomes physically manifest, the tiny people being trampled were the ones who were arrogant and proud in their earthly lives. They looked down on others, thought themselves superior because of their wealth, education, family background, or achievements, and treated people with contempt and disrespect. Now they're literally beneath everyone else, experiencing true humility for the first time. These examples show that the day of judgment isn't arbitrary punishment. It's the revealing of spiritual realities that were always true but hidden during earthly life. The earth itself has been completely transformed by divine power. It's no longer the world we knew with its diverse landscapes, mountains, valleys, oceans, and continents. Instead, Allah has replaced it with a completely new surface that's described as pure white and perfectly smooth, like an endless white plain stretching beyond the horizon in every direction. There are no hills to provide shade, no valleys to hide in, no trees or buildings to seek shelter behind. This is called Ard al-Hush, the land of gathering, and it's specifically designed for the purpose of bringing all humanity together in one place. Each community of people is gathered behind their respective prophet or messenger. The Christians gather behind Jesus, the Jews behind Moses, the followers of other prophets behind their leaders. But the largest group of all is the Ummah of Muhammad, the community of Muslims, and there's something distinctive about them. Their faces shine with a special light that sets them apart from others, a sign of the spiritual blessing that comes from following the final revelation. But as this incredible gathering takes place, something terrifying begins to unfold that tests everyone's endurance. The sun, which normally sits about 93 million miles away from Earth, is brought dramatically closer, not just a little closer, but right above the heads of humanity. The heat becomes beyond anything you can imagine, more intense than the hottest desert, the fiercest fire, or any heat source known to science. This isn't just physical torture, it's psychological torture as well, because there's no escape, no air conditioning, no shade, no relief. People begin to sweat, but this isn't ordinary perspiration. The amount of sweat corresponds directly to the level of their sins and their spiritual state. Some people sweat only up to their ankles, others to their knees. Some find themselves waist deep in their own sweat, and the worst cases involve people completely drowning in their own perspiration, suffocating in a mixture of sweat, terror, regret, and hopelessness. Imagine the psychological impact of literally drowning in the physical manifestation of your own fear and guilt. Yet not everyone suffers equally, which demonstrates that even in this day of universal judgment, Allah's mercy and justice work together perfectly. He provides shade under His mighty throne for specific categories of people who lived their lives with exceptional consciousness of this day. These are individuals who made sacrifices in the world because they prioritized their relationship with Allah over temporary pleasures and conveniences. According to a famous hadith, 7 types of people will be shaded under Allah's throne on the day when there is no shade except His. First, the just leader who ruled with fairness and always remembered that he would be held accountable for his decisions. In a world full of corrupt politicians and unjust rulers, this person stands out for putting justice above personal gain. Second, the young person who dedicated their youth to worshipping Allah instead of chasing every desire and pleasure available to them. This is particularly significant because youth is typically the time when people feel most invincible and least concerned about consequences. Third, the person whose heart was deeply attached to the mosques, meaning they found their greatest joy and peace in prayer and connection with Allah, rather than in entertainment or worldly pursuits. Fourth, two people who loved each other purely for Allah's sake, meaning their friendship wasn't based on mutual benefit, shared interests, or social status, but on shared commitment to righteousness. They came together for Allah's sake and separated for Allah's sake. Fifth, the man who was approached by a beautiful woman of high social status, who tried to seduce him into inappropriate behavior, but he refused, saying, "I fear Allah." This represents anyone who had the opportunity to commit sins in secret, but chose to avoid them because they remembered that Allah sees everything, even when no humans are watching. Sixth, the person who gave charity so secretly that even their own left hand didn't know what their right hand spent, meaning they helped others without seeking recognition, praise, or social media attention for their generosity. Seventh, the person who remembered Allah's incomplete solitude until their eyes overflowed with tears, representing someone whose love and fear of Allah was so genuine that it moved them emotionally, even when no one else was around to see their sincerity. These 7 categories show that the people who find comfort on the Day of Judgment are those who lived with constant awareness that this day was coming and made choices accordingly. While the majority of people suffer in the heat, the believers are guided to an incredibly beautiful and blessed place called the Pool of Kauthar. This isn't just any water source. It's a divine gift specifically prepared for the followers of Prophet Muhammad. The water is described as whiter than milk, sweeter than honey, and more fragrant than the finest musk. The pool is enormous, taking a month to cross, and the cups surrounding it are as numerous as the stars in the sky, each one crafted from materials more precious and beautiful than anything that exists in earthly life. Here's where something truly special happens. Prophet Muhammad himself will personally serve his followers, placing these blessed cups in their hands and giving them a drink of this sacred water. Anyone who drinks from this pool will never experience thirst again, not just physical thirst but spiritual thirst as well. It represents the ultimate satisfaction and peace that comes from being accepted by Allah. This is a moment of incredible honor and blessing, like being personally served by the most respected person you can imagine. But then something heartbreaking occurs that serves as a warning for all of us. Some people who considered themselves Muslims, who thought they were followers of the Prophet, are turned away from the pool by the angels. The Prophet, with his characteristic compassion and concern for his community, cries out in distress, my companions, my companions." But the angels inform him, "You don't know what they did after you left the world." These are people who claim to follow Islam, but later corrupted its teachings, introduced innovations that changed the religion, or abandoned the true path after initially accepting it. This scene illustrates a crucial point about religious identity. It's not enough to simply claim you belong to a particular faith or community. Your actions, your consistency, your commitment to the actual teachings, rather than just the label, these things matter tremendously. Imagine the shock and devastation of thinking you're saved, approaching the source of salvation, only to be turned away at the last moment because your life didn't actually match your claims. The combination of extreme heat, endless waiting, and psychological uncertainty becomes too much for humanity to endure. In their desperation, people decide to seek intercession, someone who can ask Allah to begin the judgment process and end this torturous period of waiting. This leads to one of the most fascinating psychological revelations about human nature, even among the greatest people who ever lived. The crowd first approaches Adam, the father of all humanity according to Abrahamic traditions. Surely he, as the first human and the one from whom everyone is descended, would be willing to intercede for his children. But Adam, despite his exalted status, remembers his mistake in paradise when he ate from the forbidden tree, and he says, "Nafsi, nafsi," meaning, "I'm concerned about myself. I can't help you with your situation." They then go to Noah, who according to the Bible and Quran, was chosen by God to survive the great flood and restart human civilization. But even he, remembering his own shortcomings and the magnitude of divine judgment, says "Nafsi, nafsi." The same response comes from Abraham, who is revered in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as a model of faith. Then Moses, who received the Torah and led the Israelites out of Egypt. Then Jesus, who Christians believe is the Son of God, and Muslims revere as one of the greatest prophets. Each of these towering figures in human history, despite their incredible achievements in closeness to God, feels too overwhelmed by the day to help others. This reveals something profound about the psychology of divine judgment. Even the most righteous people, when faced with absolute accountability before their Creator, become intensely focused on their own spiritual state. It's not selfishness in the ordinary sense. It's the natural human response to standing before infinite justice and power. Finally, the crowd approaches Muhammad, and his response is completely different from all the others. Instead of saying "Nafsi, nafsi," he says "Ana laha," which means, "I am for this task, I am for this responsibility." This demonstrates the special role and confidence that Allah granted to him as the final messenger. Muhammad then falls into prostration before the throne of Allah and begins praising his Lord with words of praise that have never been spoken before, expressions that Allah inspires in him specifically for that moment. Allah, pleased with this display of humility and intercession, says to him, "O Muhammad, raise your head, ask, and you will be granted. Intercede, and your intercession will be accepted." This is the ultimate blank check from the Creator of the universe. Muhammad could ask for anything he wants for himself, but what does he request? Ummati, ummati, meaning my community, my community. Even in this moment of ultimate power and access, his concern is not for himself, but for the people who followed his teachings. This act of selfless leadership opens the floodgates of divine mercy, and the actual judgment process can finally begin. What happens next is one of the most dramatic and visually stunning moments described in all of religious literature. Suddenly, books begin flying through the sky. But we're not talking about a few dozen or even a few thousand books. We're talking about billions upon billions of them. One complete record for every single human being who ever lived throughout all of history. These aren't ordinary books either. Each one contains a perfect, detailed record of every action, every word, every thought, every intention, every secret deed, every public act throughout that person's entire lifetime. Nothing is missing, nothing is exaggerated, nothing is forgotten. Each person stretches out their hand, and their book flies directly to them with perfect accuracy. There are no postal errors, no mix-ups, no confusion. The book that belongs to you finds you with absolute precision. But here's where the drama really intensifies. Some people catch their book in their right hand, others find it landing in their left hand, and some discover it being placed behind their backs, where they can barely reach it. The hand that receives your book immediately tells everyone around you what kind of life you lived and what your eternal fate will be. For those fortunate enough to receive their book in their right hand, an explosion of pure joy fills their hearts. They lift their book high above their heads like a trophy and cry out with happiness, Hada Makra Kitabiya. Here, read my record. Look at what I accomplished. Indeed, I was always certain that I would meet my reckoning, and I lived my life preparing for this moment. These are the people who were conscious of accountability throughout their lives, who made decisions based on the knowledge that every choice would eventually be reviewed and judged. But those who receive their book in their left hand or behind their backs experience the opposite emotional extreme. They're filled with overwhelming dread, regret, and despair that's impossible to describe. They cry out in absolute anguish, Ya laytani lam utiya kitabiya. I wish I had never been given my book. I wish I had no idea what my record contained. I wish I had died and never been brought back to life. I wish this day had never come. The difference in reactions tells the entire story of how people lived their lives and what they prioritized. Now the terrifying secrets behind those strange punishments we saw earlier become crystal clear as the books are opened and read. Those women wearing clothes of fire, their records show exactly who they were in the world. Maybe they were involved in promoting immorality through entertainment, fashion, or social media. Maybe they used their beauty and influence to lead others into temptation and sin. Maybe they normalized behaviors that Islam considers spiritually destructive. Their punishment of burning clothes represents the perfect justice of experiencing externally what they were doing to their own souls internally through their choices. Those men with blood continuously pouring from their mouths when their books are opened. The records reveal their involvement in riba, which includes not just traditional interest-based lending, but any form of making money through exploitation, deception, or taking advantage of others' desperation. This might include predatory lending, get-rich-quick schemes that hurt others, business practices that prioritize profit over human welfare, or any system where wealth is extracted without providing genuine value. The blood represents the spiritual reality that consuming forbidden wealth is like consuming the blood of your victims. Those tiny people being trampled underfoot. Their books reveal hearts filled with arrogance, pride, and contempt for others. Maybe they looked down on people because of social class, education level, skin color, nationality, or any other superficial difference. Maybe they were the type of people who made others feel small and insignificant. Now they're experiencing literally what they made others feel spiritually. They're getting a physical taste of the humiliation they used to inflict on others psychologically. These examples demonstrate that the Day of Judgment isn't about arbitrary punishment or cruel revenge. It's about perfect justice, where the spiritual reality of our choices becomes visible and tangible. Every act of kindness, every moment of humility, every sacrifice for the sake of what's right, all of it will be revealed and rewarded. Every act of cruelty, every moment of arrogance, every choice to harm others for personal benefit, all of it will also be revealed and addressed. Allah poses a question that hits everyone differently, depending on how they lived their lives. Afa hasimtum annama khalaqnakum abathan wa annakum ilayna la turja. Did you think that we created you for no purpose, and that you would never be returned to us? For people who lived as if there was no meaning to existence, no higher purpose, no accountability, this question lands like a devastating blow. Every moment they spent mocking the idea of divine purpose. Every time they said nothing happens after death, or life has no alternate meaning. All of it suddenly seems incredibly foolish when they're standing in front of their Creator, holding their book of deeds. But for those who lived with consciousness of purpose and accountability, this question brings validation and relief. They can answer, "No, we always knew you created us for a purpose. We always believed we would return to you. That's why we try to live according to your guidance. It's why we try to live according to your guidance." The difference in how this question affects people shows the psychological impact of the worldview you choose to live by. Now comes the judgment, specifically for the Ummah of Muhammad, the community of Muslims, and they're called forward first. This isn't a punishment, it's actually an honor, because they get to be judged while Allah's mercy is fresh and before his anger intensifies with the stubborn disbelievers who rejected all guidance. But even within this blessed community, there are different levels of reckoning that correspond to different levels of spiritual development and commitment. For those who lived with genuine sincerity, humility, and who made sincere repentance whenever they made mistakes, there's what's called the easy reckoning, or al-Hisab al-Yasir. Allah's mercy embraces them like a warm blanket. Their good deeds are weighed against their sins, and they're forgiven for their minor faults without detailed questioning. The process is quick, merciful, and ends with the beautiful words, "Enter paradise in peace." But then there's the detailed reckoning, al-Hisab al-Shadid, and this is where things become intense. These are people who had access to Islamic guidance, but consistently chose to ignore it. They knew what was right, but repeatedly chose what was wrong. They'll be questioned in excruciating detail about every sin, every missed prayer, every lie they told, every promise they broke, every moment they chose their desires over Allah's commands. The questioning goes deep, examining not just the external actions, but the internal motivations, the level of knowledge they had, the opportunities they wasted, the people they influenced negatively. Prophet Muhammad gave us a terrifying warning about this type of questioning. He said that whoever is questioned in detail on the day of judgment is already in serious danger of punishment, because the more Allah asks about specific details, the more exposed and vulnerable the person becomes. It's like being cross-examined by the perfect prosecutor who has access to video footage of your entire life, including your private thoughts and secret intentions. This is why one of the most important prayers taught by the Prophet was Allahumma hasibni hisaban yasiran, meaning, "O Allah, judge me with an easy reckoning." He understood that detailed questioning was something to be feared, not desired. The goal isn't to prove how well you can defend your sins. The goal is to live in such a way that detailed questioning becomes unnecessary, because your overall record clearly shows sincere effort and genuine repentance. However, Allah's mercy extends far beyond what most people imagine. For many people whose sins outweigh their good deeds on paper, Allah will still forgive them because of His infinite compassion. For others, Allah will cover their mistakes and not expose them publicly, allowing them to maintain their dignity even in judgment. Some people will have their good deeds multiplied and their sins minimized. The various ways that mercy can manifest show that while justice is absolute, it's always tempered with compassion for those who show genuine remorse and sincere intention to change. There's also an extraordinary group that bypasses the reckoning process entirely. These are the people who will enter paradise without any questioning at all. According to various Islamic sources, this group numbers 70,000 from the Ummah of Muhammad, though some narrations suggest even more. Who are these incredibly fortunate souls? They're described as people who achieved complete trust in Allah, never sought healing through forbidden means, like magic or fortune-telling, avoided asking others to perform spiritual healing on them because they relied directly on Allah, and lived with perfect patience and pure monotheism throughout every hardship. These individuals never compromised their faith for worldly gain, never took shortcuts through forbidden means, even when it would have been easier, and maintained their direct connection with Allah without intermediaries or superstitious practices. They represent the highest level of spiritual achievement possible for ordinary human beings. Their reward of entering paradise without reckoning shows that the ultimate goal isn't just to have more good deeds than bad deeds, but to reach a level of spiritual purity where questioning becomes unnecessary because their devotion is absolute and unquestionable. On the opposite extreme, there's another group that should make everyone seriously examine their choices and priorities. These are people whom Allah will not speak to, will not purify, and will not even look at on the Day of Judgment. The Prophet Muhammad repeated this description 3 times to emphasize its severity, adding, "And for them is a painful punishment." The repetition indicates that this is among the worst possible fates a human being can experience. Who falls into this category? It includes the elderly person who commits adultery, showing that age and experience don't excuse moral corruption. The lying ruler who deceives the people he's supposed to serve, demonstrating that political power comes with tremendous moral responsibility. The arrogant poor person who displays pride despite having nothing legitimate to be proud of, showing that arrogance is a spiritual disease that can affect anyone regardless of their material circumstances. But the category extends beyond these specific examples to include the broader group of people who lived as if Allah didn't exist. The atheists who spent their lives mocking religion and discouraging others from faith. The agnostics who used intellectual skepticism as an excuse to avoid moral commitment. The hypocrites who pretended to believe while secretly working against truth and justice. For all of these people, there's no hope, no second chances, no mercy. They made their choice to reject or ignore Allah during their lives, so Allah ignores them when it matters most. After every single soul has been judged, their fate determined, and their destination decided, everyone must face the final test that will physically separate the people of paradise from the people of hell forever. This is called the Sirat, and it's the most terrifying final exam imaginable. Picture a bridge, but not just any ordinary bridge. This one spans across the entire expanse of hell itself, suspended over the roaring flames and screaming inhabitants of Jahannam. The bridge is described using two comparisons that emphasize its difficulty. It's thinner than a strand of hair, meaning there's almost no margin for error in maintaining your balance. It's also sharper than the edge of a sword, meaning that even touching it wrong could cause serious harm. Beneath this bridge, the fires of hell reach upward. The heat is so intense, it would instantly melt any earthly material, and the screams and cries of hell's inhabitants create a soundtrack of absolute terror that echoes upward toward anyone attempting the crossing. Every single person, without any exceptions, must cross this bridge. There's no alternative route for VIP members, no helicopters for the wealthy, no detours for the famous. Your deeds in worldly life determine not just whether you successfully make it across, but how fast you travel and what obstacles you encounter along the way. This is where the spiritual reality of your choices becomes physically manifest in the most dramatic way possible. Some people will cross as fast as lightning, so quickly that they barely register the danger beneath them. These are individuals whose lives were filled with so much genuine good that they're practically carried across by divine assistance. Others will move like a powerful gust of wind, swift and confident, because their good deeds provide strong support. Some will cross like horses running at full gallop, fast enough to avoid most dangers, but still requiring some effort and attention. Others will move at the pace of camels, steady but cautious, having to be more careful because their record is more mixed. Some will crawl slowly on their hands and knees, struggling desperately to maintain their balance. Every movement a battle between salvation and damnation. These are people whose good and bad deeds were more equally balanced, requiring tremendous effort and divine mercy to make it across safely. But here's where the crossing becomes truly terrifying. The bridge isn't just difficult to navigate, it's actively hostile to certain types of people. Hooks and thorns rise from the depths of hell, and these aren't random obstacles. They're specifically designed to target people based on their particular sins and spiritual weaknesses. If you were habitually involved in backbiting and gossip, there might be hooks specifically designed to grab your tongue. If you were dishonest in business dealings, hooks might target your hands. If you struggled with pride and arrogance, you might find yourself losing balance and tumbling downward. Some people will be scratched or grabbed by these hooks, but manage to break free and continue their journey, representing those whose sins were forgiven through repentance or divine mercy. Others will be caught and dangled over the flames for a period before potentially being released, experiencing a taste of punishment before being allowed to proceed. And some will be pulled down completely, swallowed by the abyss of hell, with no hope of escape, representing those whose sins were so severe or unrepented that they sealed their own fate. On this bridge, your deeds literally become your source of light. Some people will have brilliant, shining illumination in front of them and to their right, making the path clearly visible and the crossing safe and straightforward. Others will have just enough light to see their next step, requiring careful attention and faith to proceed safely through relative darkness. The amount and quality of light corresponds directly to the spiritual light you generated through your choices in worldly life. The hypocrites face a particularly cruel fate on this bridge. They'll begin the crossing with light because they had some connection to faith and truth, but partway across, their light will suddenly be extinguished completely, leaving them in total darkness above the fires of hell. In their panic and desperation, they'll cry out to the true believers who are successfully crossing with steady light. Wait for us. Let us borrow some of your light. We were with you in the world, we prayed in the same mosques, we claimed the same faith, but they'll receive a devastating response. Go back to the worldly life and seek light there if you can. Of course, this is impossible because there's no going back, but the response illustrates that spiritual light isn't something you can borrow or fake at the last minute. It has to be earned through sincere choices and genuine commitment over the course of your entire life. The crossing of the Sirat represents the ultimate manifestation of personal responsibility. Every prayer you made or missed becomes part of your light or darkness. Every act of charity becomes stability under your feet. Every moment of patience during hardship becomes strength in your legs. Every choice to forgive rather than seek revenge becomes balance in your steps. Every act of kindness to others becomes divine assistance, helping you forward. Every lie you told becomes uncertainty in your footing. Every act of cruelty becomes a hook, trying to drag you down. Every moment of arrogance becomes instability, threatening your balance. For those who successfully complete the crossing, something unimaginably beautiful awaits them. On the other side of the Sirat lie the gates of Jannah, paradise, the eternal reward that makes every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of difficulty in worldly life seem insignificant in comparison. If this video has opened your eyes to prophecies you've never heard before, or if it's given you a new perspective on current world events, make sure to hit that like button and share it with every Muslim you know. These are discussions our community needs to have, and spreading this knowledge is part of preparing ourselves and others for whatever lies ahead. Subscribe to our channel for more content that connects our faith with the world around us, and drop a comment telling us what aspect of this prophecy surprised you the most. Did the casualty numbers shock you? Are you seeing signs of these events in today's news? Do you feel prepared for such trials?